It's the gayest Star Wars ever. That's what they're calling it. Apparently in the new show, lesbian witches use the Force to get pregnant. Apparently the Force is female. I don't know too much about it, but apparently people are saying like they created the Force by chanting witchcraft and impregnating women, like through magic. Okay, I guess. I mean, look, Star Wars was fun in the first series, but I never really cared that much for Star Wars. I mean, it's a fun adventure. This kid wants to join the rebellion against the big empire, and then, you know, he does. Use the Force, and then he does, and then he blows up the Death Star. And really, I was never truly inspired by this story. I mean, it felt too one-dimensional. I suppose it was revolutionary at the time. I'm a Star Trek fan, or at least I was. They've certainly butchered that IP to oblivion. So I do like what Seth MacFarlane did with Orville. The Orville. That was a fun show. Comedy at first, kind of tried to get serious. But I respect Seth MacFarlane for trying to make something more like Star Trek: The Next Generation. I like the original series. I'm not as super familiar with it. But The Next Generation is some of the best stuff ever, some of the manliest stuff ever. And I encourage you to watch that show with your kids. It is sad that we are losing touch with such epic writing. And I will explain. And I will compare and contrast to the gayest Star Wars ever. The Post-Millennial says twins Asha and May learn that they were created by the head of the coven and carried by another woman within the group. All right, here you go. Here's your...
Power of one. The power of two. The power of many.
Oh, no.
The power of one. The power of two. The power of many.
This is Star Wars. Dude, who wants to watch this? That's it, huh? Jack Masobik says, this is Star Wars now, thanks to Kathleen Kennedy. Oh, man. Showrunner Leslie? How do you pronounce it? Leslie? I'm sure it's Leslie. I don't know. Headland's newest addition to the Star Wars universe in the form of the Acolyte, known as the gayest Star Wars ever, features lesbian space witch covens who are able to immaculately conceive babies. Not only is this causing concern for being off canon, but it's a further infiltration of woke identity politics into the nerd universe of Star Wars. A clip from the coven circulated on social media with blame being heaped on Kathleen Kennedy, the showrunner, and the showrunner Headland and others. The clip shows a group of women under cloak of darkness performing some kind of ritual where they praise the power of one, the power of two, and the power of many. The new addition to the story changes the status of the concept of midichlorians, which is a plentiful supply in one's blood, gives them ability to wield the Force. That was also considered controversial, by the way. The presence of an abnormally high number of midichlorians is what made Anakin Skywalker, who grows up to be Darth Vader, so special when he met Qui-Gon Jinn. Acolyte Episode 3, a prequel some 100 years prior to the beginning of George Lucas's space opera, reveals that Anakin was not the first child to have been conceived without the act of reproduction in the Star Wars universe. Twins Asha and May learn that they were created by the head of the coven and carried by another woman within the group. In a recent interview with Headland and one of the stars of the new series, Amandla Stenberg, Headland was asked about the sexual orientation of the series, and she said that, the gayest Star Wars yet by a considerable margin. Headland and Stenberg laughed. People have told me that it's the gayest Star Wars, and frankly, I am into it. So people are saying that when Kathleen Kennedy was wearing a shirt, I think it was her, that said the Force is female, she meant it literally. And I'm not watching The Acolyte because Star Wars is trash. I like the original movies. They were fun space adventures. Not really all that complicated. I mean, the first movie is basically about a kid from a desert planet who gets radicalized by a religious group to go and blow up a military base, killing untold numbers of civilians. I think hundreds of thousands. I guess. Never really resonated with me all that much. Star Trek: The Next Generation, on the other hand. Talk about some of the greatest stuff ever. And the reason why I bring this up is because we also have this video by Erin Wexler. And she made this video about the birth control pill, saying it makes women like, they want to date their brothers. When you're on the pill, it makes you want soft men with round faces, and they're weaker because you want to be near family because it simulates pregnancy. Thus, you're trying to be with your brother. And she said, I'm not talking about your brother who it says you want more support, you want to be around family. She said, translation, you're trying to date your brother and not the good-looking brother who played football at homecoming. No, your ambiguously gay brother who was in the band and watched Star Trek. Sorry, Trekkies. Wrong, I say. Man, there is no greater show than Star Trek The Next Generation. That's it. If you have small children, they should be watching Star Trek The Next Generation. Not only is it a fun and entertaining space drama, but it has some of the best moral philosophy, technology. Man, I can't even begin to describe the absolutely amazing storytelling that is Star Trek The Next Generation. And not every episode, it can get convoluted here and there, and it can get weird in some places. That's fine. Not every show is perfect. Of course, they have the Riker's beard phenomenon. In the first season of Star Trek The Next Generation, Jonathan Frakes did not have a beard playing Commander Riker. Season 2, he grew a beard, and everyone said that's when the show got really good. It was the highest rated show at the time, I believe. It was syndicated on multiple networks, meaning, and it's kind of weird to me, it would come on, I think it was a CBS show, and then it would be like a few days later, it would rerun on other networks. That's how popular it was. But let me compare and contrast. Disney right now is producing the gayest Star Wars ever. This is what they want your children to grow up watching. It's awful. I'll tell you what I was inspired by. So let me tell you a story that I think is a good message for your kids. Now, I know Star Trek is fiction. It's not real stories. And there are real stories of sacrifice and honor that are probably better. You want people to grow up to emulate certain behaviors and to be inspired. And I don't necessarily know what creates that drive within people. What makes them connect to certain ideas or stories? Honestly, I don't know. But I tell you this. So in Star Trek, the original series, there's bad guys, the Klingons. What a silly name. And the Federation fights them. There was a war in the story between the Federation, which is, humans and their allies, and the Klingon Empire. Massive honor-based society. When they created The Next Generation, they wanted to show that there was a passage of time between the original series and the new show. The fascinating thing is the original series actually didn't have, their budget was constrained, and so as time went on, the shows actually suffered for this. Nonetheless, even though the show was canceled, it was still very popular, so they made several movies. They decided, thanks to the popularity of the movies, hey, why don't we do another Star Trek, The Next Generation? That's what it's called. And a lot of people thought it wouldn't work. When Patrick Stewart was auditioning for the role, his agent was like, look, you're going to do a couple seasons. It'll be canceled. You'll make some money. Just take the role. And he ended up doing, I think it was 8 seasons or 7 seasons. And it's been a long time. I mean, I haven't watched the full series in a minute. It's probably been, 8 years or something. But I periodically will watch it. And so they wanted to show the passage of time between the original series and The Next Generation. So in the beginning, in the new episode, you see a Klingon. That's right. One of the former enemies is now serving on board the new ship. Ha! Seems like simple writing, right? They say, how about the people they were fighting? We put one on the ship. That's a twist for fans. Well, how do you explain such a thing? Some of the best writing ever done by humans inspires me to this day. I will tell you the story. Maybe I'll embellish a little bit, but I'll tell you the general story. So the writers are basically trying to come up with what is the circumstance by which the Federation and the Klingons, warring factions, are now at peace. Now, I do think, and I will stress again, that there are real-world stories of war and peace that are inspirational, but we tell these tall tales because we want to deeply inspire and entertain. The story is this. The Federation and the Klingons were at war, and there was a forced peace by an intervening force. But still, there were routine skirmishes and battles between Klingons and Federation forces. At some point, there's a third faction called Romulans, and they're effectively meant to emulate Roman Empire honor, not honor, passion and drive. Klingons are honor. And then you have, as an aside, the Ferengi, which are capitalists. Anyway, I digress. The Federation, despite being enemies with the Klingon Empire, the Enterprise, the flagship of the Federation fleet, receives a distress signal coming from a civilian outpost. mostly women and children. The Romulans, who were seemingly supposed to be aligned with the Klingons, had decided to wipe out a Klingon colony, predominantly civilians. The Enterprise, despite being enemies with the Klingons, saw this as egregious. And of course, there is honor within humans as well. So the Enterprise rushed at maximum warp, as fast, full acceleration, to the outpost at Kittimer. That's what they called it. Upon arriving, they encountered 4 warships. As the story goes, the Enterprise knew it stood no chance against 4 enemy warships from the Romulan Empire. The Enterprise, despite this, fought and refused to back down, eventually getting destroyed in the process in an attempt to save the civilians of their own enemy. Such a powerful story. The Klingon Empire, outraged at the unprovoked attack on civilians by the Romulans, showing no honor, and recognizing the sacrifice and the bravery of the Federation, entered into peace talks and formed an alliance with the Federation, knowing the Romulans were a real threat and having been shown that humans were brave, honorable, and capable of self-sacrifice. What a story to tell. Amazing writing. And in The Next Generation, this happens all beforehand. It's just ancillary background stuff. In an episode of The Next Generation, to kind of portray the conflict, they do an episode where, again, it gets a little convoluted. The Enterprise in the past that rushed to save the Klingons, despite being enemies, was forced through a temporal rift for a short period of time. But in doing so, created an alternate timeline where they never sacrificed themselves. The Klingons viewed them as cowardly and was still at war, and the Federation was losing. They re-examine the idea of self-sacrifice in this episode. And it is sci-fi mumbo-jumbo, but basically what happens is the new Enterprise encounters and Whoopi Goldberg's has a huge role in this. They encounter the old Enterprise coming through the time rift, and they decide to save them. But Guinan, played by Whoopi Goldberg, is some kind of like higher dimensional being of some sort. She has perceptions beyond. She realizes that the timeline is shifted, and they decide, well, they have the conundrum of if they send the Enterprise back, it will be destroyed, and they will all die. And this is great, because once again, the crew of the Enterprise know that even though they're going to die, they're given a second chance. You rushed into battle headfirst, facing death, to save your own enemies. You have now been given a second chance and you can leave. And they say, we have to go back. They decide to go back to the temporal rift, get blown up, massacred, and this restores the timeline. It's a lot of it is silly sci-fi mumbo jumbo that I can understand. A lot of people aren't going to be fans of that. But take a look at what they're offering up your children. Lesbian space witches immaculately conceiving a baby and the Force being female and all that, or a story about honor and sacrifice for the betterment of your people, and sometimes not even your people. There's so much more in The Next Generation. I mean, there's one of the most amazing conversations, of course, is Data as an android trying to understand humanity, and he asks Captain Picard about terrorism, referencing actual historical references to when terror worked. Notably, he mentions the Mexican independence from the Spanish state. And they have this conversation around the difficulties of recognizing the effectiveness of terror in forcing change, but also the immorality of it and the problems it creates. There's an episode where there's a trial held to determine whether or not an android that purports to be sentient is actually a sentient entity. They ask such amazing questions. Now, again, I'll stress many of you are fans, and you're probably cheering this stuff on. Many of you aren't. By all means, if you don't want them to watch Star Trek, have them watch war documentaries and learn of the true heroes who sacrifice themselves in the real world that I can respect. Audie Murphy, is that the guy? Audie Murphy? Let me see if I can pull that one up. Maybe I'm getting the name wrong. This is the Let me pull up this guy. There we go. Audie Murphy, an American soldier, actor, songwriter, widely celebrated as the most decorated American combat soldier of World War II, described as the most highly decorated soldier in U.S. history. He received every military combat award for valor available in the U.S. Army, as well as the French and Belgian awards for heroism. Murphy received the Medal of Honor for valor that he demonstrated at the age of 19 for single-handedly holding off a company of German soldiers for an hour at the Colmore Pocket in France in January 1945, before leading a successful counterattack while wounded and out of ammunition. There's a story for your kids, too. These are the things we want to emulate. These are the things we want to share with children. The story of Audie Murphy is just absolutely incredible. Maybe it's not true. Maybe it's just war propaganda. I don't know. But I tell you this. If we don't get good messaging to the next generation, you're going to have a bunch of weak, pathetic, I don't know, cowards. We got to change that. Me, I like Star Trek. Whatever. Have fun with your gay Star Wars. If you like it, you like it. I won't watch it. I won't advocate for it. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 6 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.